The expensive crystal tumbler shattered against the marble floor, whiskey spreading like golden tears across their pristine penthouse. 3 months, Sophia's voice cracked with fury and heartbreak. 3 months of this charade while you've been with her every single night you claimed to be at the hospital. Dr. Alexander Sterling stood frozen, his phone still glowing with Victoria's latest message. Can't wait for tonight, darling. Room 412, as usual. Sophia, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been living a double life while I've been playing the perfect wife for your father's cameras? But to understand how we got here, how a brilliant medical student became trapped in a loveless marriage with Pittsburgh's most arrogant surgeon, we need to go back to where it all began. 6 months earlier, Sophia Whitmore had been reviewing for her final medical school exams when her world collapsed in a single phone call. Miss Whitmore, this is Detective Rodriguez. We need you to come to Presbyterian Hospital immediately. Your mother has suffered a massive heart attack. The Whitmore pharmaceutical fortune had once been worth $200 million. 4 generations of medical innovation, patents that revolutionized cardiac medicine, a mansion in Shadyside that hosted senators and Nobel Prize winners. Now, as Sophia rushed through the hospital corridors, she carried everything she owned in a worn leather purse, $247 in cash, her student ID, and the weight of watching everything fall apart. Her father's gambling addiction had consumed it all. The company, sold to pay debts to dangerous people. The mansion, already in foreclosure. Her medical school tuition, gone with everything else. Your mother needs immediate surgery, Dr. Morrison explained gently. The damage is extensive. Without intervention, she has perhaps weeks. Sophia stared at the estimate. $400,000 for surgery, another $200,000 for recovery and ongoing care. She made $12 an hour tutoring pre-med students. That's when Dr. Marcus Sterling appeared like a savior in an Armani suit. Sophia, my dear child. Marcus had known her grandfather, had attended those elegant dinner parties at the Whitmore estate. Don't worry about Eleanor. She'll have the finest care available. But nothing was free in Marcus Sterling's world. 3 days later, over lunch at the exclusive Duquesne Club, he made his real offer. My son Alexander needs a wife, someone with breeding, education, social standing. You need your mother's medical bills paid. Marcus leaned forward. A mutually beneficial arrangement. Dr. Sterling, I barely know Alexander. You know his reputation, brilliant surgeon, heir to Sterling medical empire. And you, my dear, carry a name that opens doors money alone cannot. The trap was elegant and inescapable. Eleanor's condition worsened daily, the bills mounted, and Marcus Sterling had made sure he was the only lifeline available. Alexander Sterling stood 6'2" in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, his dark hair styled to perfection, his gray eyes holding all the warmth of surgical steel. At 30, he was Pittsburgh's most eligible bachelor and its most emotionally unavailable man. Let's be clear, he said coldly as they signed the prenuptial agreements. This is a business transaction. I need a wife for social appearances. You need medical bills paid. We both get what we need without pretending this is something it's not. Sophia held her pen steady despite her shaking hands. I understand. Good. We'll maintain separate bedrooms, separate lives, public appearances only when necessary, and absolutely no emotional complications. What Alexander didn't mention was Victoria Kane, the stunning model he'd been secretly engaged to for 8 months. The woman he'd promised to marry once his father's latest business venture was secured. The woman whose heart he was about to break for the second time. I need 6 months, he'd told Victoria 2 nights before the wedding. 1 year at most, then we can be together properly. Victoria's green eyes had flashed with hurt and anger. You're asking me to wait while you play house with some desperate society girl? I'm asking you to trust me. This marriage means nothing. You mean everything. But as Alexander stood at the altar of St. Matthew's Cathedral, watching Sophia walk toward him in her grandmother's wedding dress, something twisted in his chest. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was a dignity in her bearing, a strength in her eyes that spoke of someone who'd endured real pain and emerged unbroken. For just a moment, he wondered what it would be like to marry someone like her for real. Then he remembered Victoria waiting for him, and his heart hardened again. The penthouse at Oxford Center was a monument to successful loneliness. 40 floors above Pittsburgh, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city like a conquered kingdom, and not a single photograph or personal touch that suggested anyone actually lived there. "Your room is down the hall," Alexander said curtly on their wedding night. "The housekeeper comes Tuesdays and Fridays. Don't touch anything in my study." Sophia nodded, clutching her single suitcase. "Of course. And Sophia?" His voice stopped her at the bedroom door. "It's Dr. Sterling. We're not friends." The first month was a masterclass in mutual avoidance. Alexander left for the hospital before dawn, returned after midnight. When they did cross paths, he treated her with the same professional courtesy he'd show a pharmaceutical rep, polite, efficient, utterly devoid of warmth. Sophia threw herself into visiting her mother, whose recovery was progressing beautifully in Marcus Sterling's private cardiac wing. Eleanor had a suite that rivaled a 5-star hotel, nurses who had time to chat, specialists flown in from Johns Hopkins. "You look thin, sweetheart," Eleanor observed during one visit. "Is married life treating you well?" Sophia forced a smile. "Alexander is very dedicated to his work." It was easier than explaining that her husband spoke to her maybe 5 minutes a day, and usually only to inform her of some social obligation they needed to attend together. But the real torture was the nights she heard him on the phone, his voice dropping to intimate tones she'd never heard directed at her. "I miss you too." "No, she's not. It's not like that, Vic. Of course I love you." Sophia would press her pillow over her ears and try to forget that her husband was planning a future that didn't include her. The first crack appeared during the Sterling Medical Fundraising Gala, 6 weeks into their marriage. Sophia moved through the evening like a trained dancer, smiling at donors, charming board members, playing the perfect wife, while Alexander's hand rested possessively on her waist. She was good at this. Years of her grandfather's dinner parties had prepared her for exactly this performance. Mrs. Sterling approached Patricia Mellon, whose family had owned half of Pittsburgh since before the Civil War. "How lovely to finally meet you. Your grandmother and I were dear friends." "Mrs. Mellon, what a pleasure. Grandmother always spoke so fondly of you." Alexander watched from across the conversation, struck by something he hadn't expected. Sophia wasn't just playing a role. She genuinely belonged in this world. The ease with which she navigated conversations about art, literature, family histories that stretched back centuries. This wasn't performance. This was breeding. For the first time, he understood what his father had really purchased. But the evening shattered when Alexander's phone buzzed during the silent auction. "Emergency at the hospital," he murmured to Sophia. "I'll be back in an hour." Sophia nodded, continuing to bid on a vacation package to Tuscany they'd never used together. She didn't see Alexander slip onto the hotel's garden terrace, or the way his voice dropped to intimate tones. "Victoria, I can't talk long. Yes, I miss you. Tuesday? I'll make it work." But Marcus Sterling saw, and Marcus Sterling was not pleased. "Having trouble focusing on your responsibilities, son?" Alexander spun around, phone clutched in his hand. "Dad, I was just talking to your girlfriend while your wife charms half of Pittsburgh's medical board into writing 7-figure checks." Marcus's voice was ice. "Tell me, Alexander, which one is actually working for the family tonight?" For the first time, Alexander felt something like shame. It all came apart on a Tuesday night in October. Alexander had claimed another emergency surgery, kissing Sophia's forehead in a gesture that almost seemed genuine. "Don't wait up." But Sophia couldn't sleep. Restless, she'd wandered into Alexander's study to return a medical journal he'd left in the living room. That's when she saw his phone, forgotten on the desk, lighting up with messages. Tonight was incredible. I needed that after the stress of this fake marriage. Can't wait to be done with this charade. 6 more months and we can announce our real engagement. She's pretty enough, but so cold. Nothing like you, darling. Each message was a knife twist. But it was the photos that destroyed her. Intimate pictures from hotel rooms, timestamps showing they were taken during his claimed surgeries. When Alexander returned at midnight, expecting to find the penthouse dark and silent, he instead found Sophia waiting in the living room, his phone in her hands, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Emergency surgery," she said quietly. "Is that what you call it?" Alexander's face went white. "Sophia, let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you've been lying to me every single night. How you've been humiliating me while I played the devoted wife for your father's social climbing." "Our marriage isn't real." The words exploded out of him. "You said so yourself. It's a business arrangement." "A business arrangement that includes basic respect." Sophia's composure finally cracked. "I gave up everything for this marriage, Alexander. My future, my dignity, my chance at finding someone who could actually love me, and you can't even give me the courtesy of discretion? I never asked you to sacrifice anything for me." "Yes, you did. Every time you treated me like a stranger in our own home. Every time you made me feel like an unwelcome burden. Every time you reminded me this marriage was just an inconvenience you had to endure." Alexander stared at her, seeing clearly for the first time the pain his coldness had caused. But his pride and guilt made him lash out instead of apologize. "At least I'm honest about what I want. At least I'm not pretending this farce could ever be real." The cruelty of it took Sophia's breath away. "Get out." "What?" "Get out. Go to her. Go to your precious Victoria who actually wants you. Stop pretending you're trapped here when you've been running to her every chance you get." Alexander grabbed his keys, his movements sharp with fury and guilt. "Fine. At least with her I don't have to pretend to be something I'm not." "What's that?" "A husband who actually cares about his wife." The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. Alexander's hands shook on the steering wheel as he drove through Pittsburgh's night streets, Sophia's words echoing in his mind like accusations. She was right. About all of it. He was a coward, using both women for his own convenience while giving neither of them what they deserved. The guilt and self-loathing made him press harder on the accelerator. 40 miles an hour through downtown. 50 on the side streets. 60 approaching the intersection where Fifth Avenue met the bridge. He almost didn't see the red light. The semi-truck was already halfway through the intersection when Alexander's BMW slammed into its side. Metal screamed against asphalt, glass exploded in deadly fragments, and the world went spinning, tumbling, shattering. In the seconds before unconsciousness claimed him, Alexander's last coherent thought wasn't of Victoria, wasn't of his father or his career or his pride. It was of Sophia's face, not angry but heartbroken, and the devastating realization that he'd destroyed something precious without ever understanding what he'd had. Sophia got the call at 3:17 a.m. "Mrs. Sterling, this is Dr. Martinez at Presbyterian Hospital. Your husband has been in an accident." The world tilted. Despite everything, despite the hurt and humiliation, the thought of losing Alexander hit her like a physical blow. She found him in the ICU, tubes and wires turning him into a stranger. His face was pale beneath the bruises, his strong surgeon's hands bandaged and still. "The injuries are serious," Dr. Martinez explained. "Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, possible spinal compression. The next 48 hours will tell us more." Marcus Sterling arrived an hour later, his usual composure cracked with fear. "How is he?" "Critical but stable." Sophia's voice was hoarse from crying. "Dr. Martinez says the surgery went well, but there might be permanent damage to his spine, his hands." She couldn't finish. For the first time since their arranged marriage, Marcus looked at her not as an acquisition, but as a human being. "You don't have to stay. I know things between you and Alexander have been difficult. Sophia looked at the man who'd manipulated her into this marriage, then at Alexander, lying helpless in the hospital bed. "He's my husband. I'm staying." She didn't leave the hospital for 3 days. Marcus brought her changes of clothes. Eleanor was moved to a room nearby so Sophia could visit between her vigils. The nursing staff began bringing her coffee without being asked. On the 4th day, Alexander opened his eyes. "Sophia." His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here." She leaned forward, taking his uninjured hand. "Don't try to talk. You've been in an accident." "I remember." His gray eyes were different somehow, stripped of their usual cold arrogance. "I was driving to—" He stopped, shame flooding his features. "Victoria. It doesn't matter now." "Yes, it does." Alexander's grip on her hand tightened. "Everything you said was true. I was a coward. I was cruel. I was using both of you, and you deserved better." Sophia felt tears spill over. "Alexander, don't— I need to say this while I still can." His voice grew stronger. "You've been nothing but gracious and dignified, and I treated you like an inconvenience. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." For a moment, Sophia saw past the arrogant surgeon, past the cold husband, to the frightened boy who'd lost his mother too young and learned to armor his heart against further loss. "We both made mistakes," she said softly. "Let's focus on getting you better." But as she sat beside his bed, watching him drift back to sleep, Sophia realized something had shifted between them. The walls he'd built so carefully were finally beginning to crack. Alexander's injuries were extensive but not career-ending, though the recovery would be long and humbling. His right hand had suffered nerve damage that would require months of physical therapy. His spine, while not severed, had compression injuries that left him weak and unsteady. For a man accustomed to control, to being the one who healed others, becoming dependent was perhaps the cruelest injury of all. "I can manage on my own," he insisted, when Sophia helped him from the wheelchair to the couch in their penthouse. "I know you can," she replied patiently, "but you don't have to." The first weeks were a careful dance of pride and necessity. Alexander hated needing help with basic tasks, showering, dressing, cutting his food. Sophia provided assistance with the same dignity she might show any patient, never making him feel pitied or broken. Gradually, something began to change between them. It started small, Alexander asking about her day instead of grunting acknowledgement. Sophia bringing him coffee the way he liked it without being asked. Conversations that lasted more than 5 minutes. "Why did you stay?" Alexander asked one evening as Sophia helped him with his physical therapy exercises. "At the hospital, I mean, after everything I put you through." Sophia was quiet for a moment, working his damaged hand through gentle ranges of motion. "Because underneath all that arrogance and cruelty, I saw someone who was hurting, someone who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten how to let anyone in. Even someone who treated you terribly? Especially someone who treated me terribly. People don't become cruel without reason, Alexander. They become cruel because they're protecting something fragile." Her insight stunned him into silence. How had she seen through his defenses so clearly when he'd barely understood them himself? "My mother," he said suddenly. "What about her?" "She died when I was 8. Cancer. I watched this brilliant, beautiful woman waste away while I was powerless to help her." Alexander's voice grew rough with old pain. "I swore I'd never care about someone enough to feel that helpless again." Sophia's hand stilled on his. "And Victoria?" "Was safe. Beautiful, fun, but safe. I never let her matter enough to really hurt me." He looked up at Sophia, something vulnerable in his eyes. "But you—" "I what?" "You terrified me. Because from the first day, you mattered. And I didn't know how to handle that." The admission hung between them like a bridge, fragile and tentative, but real. "I'm not going anywhere, Alexander," Sophia said softly. Whatever this is between us, whatever it becomes, I'm not your mother. I'm not going to disappear and leave you alone." For the first time since childhood, Alexander Sterling let someone see him cry. 3 months into Alexander's recovery, their penthouse had transformed from a cold showplace into something that actually felt like home. Medical journals shared space with Sophia's literature books on the coffee table. Her chamomile tea had claimed permanent residence next to his espresso machine. The rigid schedule of avoidance had been replaced by something softer, more natural. Alexander found himself looking forward to things he'd never noticed before. The sound of Sophia's key in the lock when she returned from visiting her mother. The way she hummed unconsciously while making breakfast. The gentle patience in her voice when she helped him with his physical therapy exercises. It was during one of these sessions that he first caught himself staring. "Okay, now try to make a fist," Sophia instructed, her hands gently supporting his damaged right hand. "Don't force it. Just let the muscles remember." Alexander watched her face as she concentrated, the way she bit her lower lip when she was focused, the soft curve of her cheek in the afternoon light streaming through their massive windows. When had she become so beautiful? Not just objectively attractive, he'd always known that, but beautiful in a way that made his chest tight with something he couldn't name. "That's better," she said, smiling up at him. "I can see the improvement from last week. Thanks to you." The words came out rougher than he'd intended, weighted with more emotion than a simple acknowledgement should carry. Sophia looked up at him, something shifting in her expression. "Alexander." He cleared his throat, forcing himself to look away. "Let's try the wrist rotations." But the moment lingered between them, charged with possibility. It was a Tuesday evening, rain pattering against their floor-to-ceiling windows, when everything changed. Alexander had been reading in his study while Sophia worked on her laptop in the living room, both of them comfortable in the quiet companionship that had developed between them. "Alexander," Sophia's voice carried a note of curiosity. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up from his medical journal. "Of course." "Why surgery? I mean, what made you choose it over other specialties?" The question was simple, but no one had asked him that in years. Most people assumed it was about prestige or money, or following in his father's footsteps. "Control," he said after a moment. "In surgery, if you're good enough, skilled enough, prepared enough, you can fix things. You can take something broken and make it whole again." He paused, then added more quietly, "I couldn't fix my mother, but maybe I could fix other people's mothers." Sophia set aside her laptop, giving him her full attention. "How old were you when she died?" 8. Old enough to understand she was sick, not old enough to understand why the doctors couldn't help her. That must have been terrifying. Alexander nodded, surprised by how easy it was to talk to her about this. "My father threw himself into work afterward. I think he couldn't stand being home with all the reminders. So I learned to take care of myself pretty early. Is that why you're so—" Sophia searched for the word. "Controlling? Emotionally unavailable? Choose your favorite psychological flaw." She laughed softly. "I was going to say independent. But those work too." For the first time in months, Alexander found himself genuinely smiling. "Your turn. Why medicine? And don't say it was the family business." Sophia curled her legs under her on the couch, getting comfortable. "When I was 12, I volunteered at a children's hospital for a school project. There was this little boy, maybe 6 years old, who'd been there for weeks recovering from heart surgery. He was scared, lonely, missing his family who lived too far away to visit regularly." She paused, her eyes distant with memory. "I started reading to him during my volunteer hours. Nothing special, just picture books and silly stories. But the way his whole face would light up when I walked into his room," she shrugged. "I realized that healing isn't just about fixing bodies. It's about fixing spirits too." Alexander felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. "You wanted to be the person who made scared children feel safe." I wanted to be the person I needed when I was scared. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Alexander found himself leaning forward, drawn to her openness in a way that had nothing to do with physical attraction and everything to do with recognition. Here was someone who understood that beneath every professional achievement was a frightened child trying to make sense of an unpredictable world. "What scared you?" he asked gently. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. "My father's drinking, the way he'd disappear for days, leaving my mother and me wondering if he was alive or dead. The uncertainty, never knowing which version of him would come home." She looked up at Alexander. "I think that's why I stayed in our marriage even when you were cruel. Uncertainty I can handle. It's abandonment that terrifies me." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. How many times had he threatened to leave, stormed out during arguments, made her feel like he was always 1 foot out the door? He'd been so focused on protecting himself from abandonment that he'd become the abandoner. "Sophia, It's okay," she said quickly. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I want you to understand that I'm not going anywhere. Whatever this is between us, whatever it becomes, you don't have to worry about me disappearing." Alexander stared at her, this woman who'd seen him at his worst and chosen to stay anyway, who'd taken his cruelty and responded with compassion, who was offering him the one thing he'd never dared to hope for, permanence. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "Maybe not," Sophia replied with a small smile. "But you have me anyway. That's what grace is." It happened 3 weeks later, on a Thursday evening that started like any other. Alexander was in the kitchen, struggling to open a jar of pasta sauce with his still healing right hand. After months of progress, small setbacks like this still frustrated him disproportionately. "Need help?" Sophia appeared at his elbow, not waiting for an answer before gently taking the jar from his hands. "I should be able to open a jar," he muttered, pride and embarrassment making his voice sharp. "You will be able to," she said matter-of-factly, muscles flexing as she twisted the stubborn lid. "But right now, you don't have to." She handed the opened jar back to him with such casual grace that it took the sting out of needing help. This was what living with Sophia was like. She had a way of making accommodation feel like cooperation rather than pity. "Thank you," he said, meaning more than just the jar. They moved around each other in the kitchen, with an ease that would have surprised their former selves. Sophia chopping vegetables while Alexander stirred sauce, a domestic dance that felt more intimate than anything he'd shared with Victoria, despite years of relationship. "Oh!" Sophia suddenly laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. "That reminds me of the worst date I ever went on. This was before," she gestured vaguely between them, "everything. I was maybe 19 and this guy took me to this fancy restaurant where everything came in tiny, artistically arranged portions." She continued cutting vegetables while she talked, her voice animated. "So we're 3 courses in, and I'm still starving because each plate had maybe 2 bites of food. The guy is going on and on about the culinary artistry and the symphony of flavors, and all I can think about is the burger joint across the street." Alexander found himself smiling, caught up in her storytelling. "So finally, the dessert comes, this tiny square of chocolate that probably cost more than my car payment, and I take this huge bite because I'm so hungry, and it turns out to be filled with some kind of liqueur that I was absolutely not expecting." "What happened?" Alexander asked, though he suspected he knew from the mischievous glint in her eyes. "I spit it out, all over the table, all over his very expensive shirt, all over the couple at the next table." Sophia was laughing so hard now that she had to stop chopping. The look on his face, pure horror, like I'd committed a cardinal sin against fine dining. Alexander was laughing too, imagining 19-year-old Sophia mortifying her pretentious date. Please tell me that wasn't the end of it. "Oh no, it gets better. I was so embarrassed that I stood up too fast, knocked over my water glass, which cascaded onto the floor, which made the waiter slip and crash into a cart full of desserts." She wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. It was like a scene from a slapstick comedy. The manager comped our entire meal just to get us out of there. Did you ever see him again? He dropped me off at home in complete silence and never called again, which was probably for the best, considering he spent the entire ride lecturing me about appropriate behavior in refined establishments. Sophia dissolved into giggles again, and Alexander felt something crack open in his chest. Not just affection or attraction, but something deeper. Joy. When was the last time he'd felt genuine joy? When was the last time someone had made him laugh until his sides hurt? He was staring at her, he realized, watching the way her eyes crinkled at the corners, the way she threw her head back when she laughed, the way her hair caught the kitchen light like spun gold. She was radiant in that moment, completely herself, unguarded and alive and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with genetics and everything to do with spirit. "What?" she asked, noticing his intense attention. "You," Alexander said without thinking. You're incredible." The laughter faded from her eyes, replaced by something softer, more uncertain. "Alexander." He stepped closer, drawn by something stronger than caution or common sense. "Sophia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay. Would it be all right if I kissed you?" The question hung between them, loaded with months of careful distance and growing connection. Sophia's breath caught, her eyes searching his face. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Because listening to you laugh just now, watching you be so completely yourself, I realized that I'm falling in love with you. And I don't want to hide from that anymore." Sophia's hands stilled on the cutting board. "Alexander, are you sure? Because if we cross this line, I know, no going back to being strangers." He reached up to cup her face gently. "I don't want to be strangers anymore, Sophia. I want to be your husband. Really your husband." "What about Victoria?" "I ended things with Victoria weeks ago. The night I came home from the hospital, I called her and told her it was over, that I couldn't keep using her as an escape from my real life." Sophia's eyes widened. "You never said anything." "I didn't want you to think it was because of obligation or guilt. I wanted it to be because of choice. My choice to choose you, choose this, choose us." Tears gathered in Sophia's eyes. "I've been falling in love with you too. Even when I was angry, even when I hated what you were doing to us, I couldn't stop caring about you." Alexander's thumb brushed over her cheekbone, wiping away a tear that had spilled over. "So is that a yes?" Instead of answering, Sophia rose up on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, years of hurt and hope condensed into a moment of perfect connection. Then Alexander's arms came around her waist, pulling her closer, and Sophia's hands fisted in his shirt, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and necessary and long overdue. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "I love you," Alexander whispered against her lips. "I love your laugh and your strength, and the way you stayed when anyone else would have run. I love the way you make me want to be better than I am." "I love you too," Sophia replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I love your dedication and your intelligence, and the way you're so gentle with patience, even when you're angry with the world. I love the man you are when you let your guard down." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring the moment when everything changed between them. 2 weeks after their first kiss, they'd settled into a new rhythm of cautious courtship. Alexander was sleeping in the guest room, giving them both time to adjust to this new dynamic without rushing into physical intimacy. They were learning each other all over again, not as reluctant spouses, but as people choosing to fall in love. It was a Thursday night when the incident happened that would later make them both laugh and blush in equal measure. Alexander had been working late in his study, reviewing cases for his return to surgery the following month. His hand strength was nearly back to normal, his coordination sharp, and he was eager to resume the work that had always defined him. The apartment was quiet. Sophia had gone to bed hours ago after helping him with his evening exercises. He'd been so absorbed in his research that he hadn't noticed how late it had gotten until his eyes began to strain. Deciding to call it a night, he closed his laptop and padded quietly toward his room, not wanting to wake Sophia. But as he passed her bedroom, he noticed the door was slightly ajar, lamplight spilling into the hallway. Concerned that she might have fallen asleep reading again, a habit he'd noticed she had when stressed, he approached the door to check if she needed her light turned off. That's when he saw her. Sophia stood with her back to the door, having just removed her sweater. She was reaching for her pajama top, the elegant line of her spine visible in the soft lamplight, her skin golden and perfect. Her hair was loose, cascading over her shoulders like dark silk, and there was something so unself-consciously graceful about her movements that Alexander felt his breath catch. It lasted only seconds before she turned, reaching for something on her dresser, and caught sight of him in the doorway. Her eyes widened, and she quickly grabbed the sweater, clutching it to her chest. "Alexander!" She was blushing furiously. "I'm sorry, I thought you were asleep." "No, I'm sorry," he said quickly, averting his eyes even as the image burned itself into his memory. "I saw your light and wanted to check if you'd fallen asleep reading again. I should have knocked." "It's fine," she said, though her voice was slightly breathless. "Just maybe give me a minute?" "Of course. I'll be in the kitchen." Alexander retreated quickly, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with desire. The glimpse had been innocent, unintentional, but it had awakened something in him that months of careful emotional connection had been building toward. Sophia wasn't just beautiful, he'd always known that. But seeing her in that private moment, unguarded and natural, had driven home the reality that this was his wife. Not in name only anymore, but potentially in every sense of the word. 10 minutes later, Sophia appeared in the kitchen wearing her pajamas and a robe, her cheeks still faintly pink. "I made tea," Alexander said, gesturing to 2 steaming mugs on the counter. "Chamomile, peace offering for my terrible timing." Sophia accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping her hands around it. "It's not like you did it on purpose." "No, but I should have been more careful. I know we're still figuring out boundaries and—" "Alexander." Sophia looked up at him, something vulnerable but determined in her expression. "We're married, legally, officially married, and we're—" She paused, searching for words. "We're courting each other, I suppose. These situations are going to happen. Still, I want you to feel comfortable, safe. I don't want you to think I'm taking advantage of the situation or pushing for more than you're ready for." Sophia set down her mug and stepped closer to him. "What if I told you that I've been wondering what it would be like if we stopped being so careful with each other?" Alexander's breath caught. "Sophia, I'm not saying we have to rush anything. But Alexander, I've been married to you for 6 months. I've seen you at your worst and your best. I've fallen in love with your mind and your heart and—" She blushed, but continued. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't attracted to you." "You're attracted to me." The question came out rougher than he'd intended. "Have you looked in a mirror lately? You're a very handsome man, Alexander Sterling. And when you smile at me the way you've been doing lately, when you look at me like I'm something precious," she shook her head. "Let's just say the physical therapy sessions have been more distracting than you probably realize." Alexander set down his own mug and moved closer until he was standing directly in front of her. "Sophia, I need you to know that whatever happens between us, whenever it happens, it will be because we both want it. Not because of obligation or gratitude or any of the complicated circumstances that brought us together. I know that. And I need you to know that what I saw tonight, it wasn't intentional, but it was beautiful. You are beautiful. Not just physically, though you are incredibly beautiful, but all of you. Your spirit, your strength, your capacity for forgiveness." Sophia reached up to touch his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. "Alexander, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Anything. Are you still sleeping in the guest room because you think I need space or because you're scared? The question hit its mark. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. Both, I suppose. I don't want to pressure you, but I'm also terrified of screwing this up. What we have now, it's so good, Sophia. It's better than anything I've ever had. The thought of losing it because I moved too fast or wanted too much. Hey. Sophia's hand moved to the back of his neck, fingers threading through his hair. You're not going to lose me, and you're not going to screw this up by wanting me. How can you be so sure? Because I want you too. I've wanted you for weeks, Alexander. Every time you help me reach something on a high shelf and I catch your scent. Every time you laugh at one of my stories and your whole face transforms. Every time you look at me like you're looking at me right now. Alexander's control, already strained, began to fracture. Sophia, if you keep talking like that... What? She asked, stepping even closer. What will happen? I'm going to kiss you, and I'm not going to want to stop. Then don't. The permission was all he needed. Alexander cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with months of pent-up longing, all the careful restraint they'd both been showing, finally giving way to honest desire. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Your room or mine? Sophia whispered. Alexander's answer was to sweep her up in his arms and carry her down the hall to his bedroom, both of them laughing breathlessly at the romantic cliché of it all. Alexander's bedroom had always been as impersonal as the rest of the penthouse. Expensive furniture, neutral colors, nothing that revealed the man who lived there. But as he set Sophia gently on her feet beside his bed, everything about the space felt different, intimate, theirs. Are you sure? He asked, his hands resting lightly on her waist. Because once we do this, we'll be husband and wife in every sense, Sophia finished. I know, Alexander. I want that. I want us. What happened between them that night was unlike anything either had experienced before. With Victoria, Alexander had always held part of himself back, kept some emotional distance even in the most intimate moments. With previous boyfriends, Sophia had always felt like she was performing a role, giving what was expected rather than what she genuinely felt. But this was different. This was connection and vulnerability and trust made physical. Alexander was gentle but passionate, worshipful in the way he touched her, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real, was his. Sophia was open and responsive, giving herself completely to this man who'd hurt her and healed with her and chosen her every day since. They made love with the desperate tenderness of people who'd found each other against impossible odds, who'd built something real from the ashes of an arrangement meant to benefit everyone except them. Afterward, as they lay tangled in sheets that would forever after smell like both of them, Alexander traced lazy patterns on Sophia's bare shoulder. I love you, he said quietly, the words carrying more weight now, more certainty. I love you in ways I didn't know were possible. I love you too, Sophia replied, pressing a kiss to his collarbone. Even when I hated you, I think some part of me was already falling in love with you. Really? Really? You were so careful with your patience, so gentle despite all that arrogance. And sometimes, when you thought no one was looking, I'd see this sadness in you that broke my heart. Alexander tightened his arms around her. I was so lonely, Sophia. For years before you, I was just empty. Going through the motions of a life that looked successful from the outside, but felt hollow. And now? Now I feel like I'm actually living, instead of just surviving. They talked until dawn, sharing stories and secrets, mapping the emotional territory they'd been too scared or stubborn to explore before. Alexander told her about his recurring dreams where he couldn't save his mother, about the pressure he felt to live up to his father's expectations, about the fear that he'd inherited some fundamental inability to love properly. Sophia told him about the nights she'd spent as a child listening to her parents argue, about the way she'd learned to read people's moods and adjust herself accordingly to keep peace, about her own fear that she was only lovable when she was useful. "That's not true," Alexander said fiercely. "You're not lovable because you take care of people, Sophia. You're lovable because of who you are. Your laugh, your terrible taste in romantic comedies, the way you steal the blankets in your sleep." "I do not steal the blankets." "You absolutely steal the blankets. I've been cold every night for the past 2 weeks." Sophia laughed, the sound soft and delighted in the pre-dawn darkness. "Well, I guess you'll have to stay closer to keep warm." "Is that an invitation?" "It's a promise." As the sun rose over Pittsburgh, painting their bedroom in shades of gold and rose, Alexander and Sophia Sterling began their first day as a couple who'd chosen each other completely. Not because of duty or desperation or family pressure, but because love, real love, had grown in the space between who they'd been forced to be and who they wanted to become. 6 months after that transformative night, Sophia Sterling stood in the bathroom of their penthouse, staring at 2 pink lines that would change their lives forever. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with overwhelming joy. She and Alexander had spent the past half-year in a honeymoon phase that showed no signs of ending. They'd redone the penthouse together, replacing cold modern art with photographs from their travels, adding warmth and personality to spaces that had once felt like a beautiful prison. Alexander had returned to surgery with renewed passion, his near-death experience making him an even more compassionate doctor. Sophia had re-enrolled in medical school, her dream of becoming a pediatric cardiologist finally within reach. They'd traveled together, a long weekend in San Francisco, a week in the mountains of Colorado where Alexander taught her to ski, badly, and she taught him to build proper campfires. They'd learned each other's rhythms, each other's needs, each other's bodies with the thoroughness of people who intended to spend their lives together. And now this, a baby, their baby. "Sophia?" Alexander's voice carried from the bedroom. "Everything all right? You've been in there for 20 minutes. She took a deep breath, opened the bathroom door, and found her husband sitting on the edge of their bed, hair still tousled from sleep, concern evident in his gray eyes. "Alexander, I need to tell you something." He was instantly alert, the doctor in him cataloging her expression, her posture, her tone. "Are you ill? Should I call?" "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Alexander's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, wonder, and finally, pure joy. Are we? He stood up, moving toward her with careful steps, as if sudden movements might make the news disappear. "Are you sure?" Sophia held up the pregnancy test, tears streaming down her cheeks. "2 tests, both positive. We're going to have a baby, Alexander." What happened next would become one of Sophia's most treasured memories. Alexander, this composed, controlled surgeon who rarely showed excessive emotion, let out a whoop of joy that probably woke half the building. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around while both of them laughed and cried simultaneously. "A baby," he kept repeating, setting her down gently and immediately placing his hands on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Sophia asked, though his reaction had made the answer obvious. "Happy?" Alexander looked up at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Sophia, I never thought I'd have this. A real family, children of my own, someone who loved me enough to want to build a life with me." His voice broke slightly. "I'm not just happy. I'm grateful. So incredibly grateful." They spent the morning making plans, calling Eleanor, who screamed with joy and immediately began planning to move closer to help with the baby, and marveling at how completely their lives had transformed. "Boy or girl?" Alexander asked as they sat on their couch, Sophia's head on his shoulder, his hand never leaving her stomach. "Too early to tell." "Does it matter?" "Not even a little bit, as long as they're healthy and they have your laugh." What if they have your stubborn streak? Then God help us all, Alexander replied solemnly, making Sophia dissolve into the giggles he loved so much. The pregnancy wasn't without challenges. Sophia's morning sickness was severe, leaving her exhausted and barely able to keep food down during her first trimester. Alexander, despite his medical training, found himself hovering anxiously, bringing her ginger tea at all hours and researching every symptom with the dedication he usually reserved for complex surgical cases. "You're driving yourself crazy," Sophia pointed out one evening, finding him hunched over medical journals at 11 p.m., highlighting passages about prenatal nutrition. "I just want to make sure we're doing everything right, that you're getting the best care possible." Alexander. She moved behind his chair, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "I have the best obstetrician in Pittsburgh. My mother is healthy and helping plan the nursery. And I have a husband who loves me enough to research pregnancy symptoms like he's preparing for a medical board's exam. I think we're doing just fine. But what if something goes wrong? What if I'm not good at this? I don't know anything about being a father, Sophia. My dad was always working, and when he wasn't working, he was criticizing. What if I... Hey." Sophia turned his chair around, cupping his face in her hands. "Look at me. You're going to be an amazing father." "You know how I know?" "How?" "Because you're already worried about being good at it. Bad fathers don't lose sleep over whether they're doing enough." She kissed his forehead. "Besides, we're going to figure it out together. That's what partners do." The word partners still gave Alexander a little thrill. For so many years, he'd been solitary by choice and circumstance. Now he had someone who truly shared his life, his dreams, his fears. They decided to wait until Sophia was safely through her first trimester before telling Marcus and the broader social circle that had been so invested in their arranged marriage. The announcement was made at the annual Sterling Medical Center fundraiser, the same event where they'd once barely been able to tolerate each other's presence. This time, they arrived together, Sophia radiant in a midnight blue gown that Alexander couldn't stop admiring, her hand resting protectively over the small bump that was just beginning to show. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus Sterling announced during his speech, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "This year has been remarkable for Sterling Medical Center, but I'm particularly pleased to share some personal news. My son Alexander and his wife Sophia will be welcoming their first child this spring." The applause was thunderous. Sophia felt Alexander's hand squeeze hers, saw the genuine pride and happiness on his father's face. The man who had orchestrated their marriage as a business arrangement had become invested in their actual happiness. Later, as they swayed together on the dance floor, Alexander whispered in her ear, "Do you remember the last time we danced at one of these? Our wedding reception. You could barely stand to touch me. And now I can't stand to let you go." He spun her gently, careful of her condition. "Sophia, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm grateful for how we started. I know that sounds crazy given how much pain we both went through, but if we'd met under normal circumstances, I would have been too scared to let you matter. Too wrapped up in my own defenses to see what was right in front of me." Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes. "Are you saying you're grateful my family lost everything and your father forced us together?" "I'm saying I'm grateful that life conspired to put you in my path, even if the method was complicated. Sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances." "And sometimes," Sophia added, echoing their conversation from months earlier, "the people we're meant to love find us in the most unexpected ways." They danced until late in the evening, surrounded by friends and colleagues who had watched their transformation from reluctant spouses to devoted partners. The woman who had once been whispered about as that poor Thornfield girl who married for money was now simply Dr. Alexander Sterling's beloved wife, glowing with happiness and the promise of new life. Designing the nursery became an obsession for both of them, though they approached it differently. Alexander researched cribs and car seats with the same methodical thoroughness he brought to surgical planning, creating spreadsheets, comparing safety ratings, and consulting pediatrician colleagues about everything from optimal room temperature to the best positioning for monitoring equipment. Sophia focused on making the space warm and welcoming, choosing soft colors that would work for either a boy or girl, selecting books and toys with care, hanging family photographs that would show their child how much they were loved before they were even born. "We're nesting," Eleanor observed one afternoon, finding them both in the nursery. Alexander assembling a crib with engineering precision, while Sophia arranged and rearranged stuffed animals. "We're preparing," Alexander corrected, though his smile suggested he knew exactly what Eleanor meant. "It's the same thing, dear. Your grandfather did the exact same thing when Sophia's father was born. Drove me absolutely crazy with his lists and schedules and contingency plans." "And how did that work out?" Sophia asked. "He was a wonderful father when he allowed himself to be. The problem was never lack of love or preparation. It was trusting that love would be enough." Eleanor's words stayed with Alexander long after she'd gone home. Trust that love would be enough. It was a concept he was still learning to embrace. At 28 weeks, Sophia began experiencing cramping that sent both of them into a panic. Alexander drove to the hospital with the controlled urgency of someone trying not to fall apart, his medical training warring with his fear as a husband and expectant father. "It's probably nothing," he kept saying, though his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Braxton Hicks contractions are common at this stage. Perfectly normal." "Since when do you repeat information like a mantra?" Sophia asked, trying to inject lightness into her voice despite her own fear. "Since the person I love most in the world might be in trouble." The tests revealed that Sophia was experiencing early labor symptoms brought on by stress and overwork. Bed rest was prescribed, along with medications to stop the contractions. "The baby's fine," Dr. Rodriguez assured them after what felt like hours of testing. "Strong heartbeat, good development, no signs of distress. But Sophia, you need to take it easier. No more 12-hour study sessions, no more trying to keep up with your pre-pregnancy schedule." That night, as they lay in bed with Sophia's head on Alexander's chest, he finally admitted his deepest fear. "I was so scared today, not just about the baby but about losing you." "You're not going to lose me." "You can't promise that. No one can promise that." His arms tightened around her. "But for the first time in my life, I have something worth being scared about losing. And I don't know how to handle that. The same way you handle everything else that matters to you. With skill, dedication, and the knowledge that you're not doing it alone. We're really going to be parents. We really are. I love you, Sophia Sterling. I love our baby. I love the life we've built together. I love you too. All of you forever." Elena Rose Sterling made her entrance into the world on a snowy February morning, 3 weeks early, but perfectly healthy. At 5 pounds, 12 ounces, she was a tiny miracle with Alexander's dark hair and what the nurses swore were Sophia's expressive eyes. Alexander, who had assisted in hundreds of surgeries and remained calm under the most intense pressure, was a complete mess during Sophia's labor. "Her contractions are 2 minutes apart," he announced to the delivery room staff, as if they weren't already monitoring everything closely. "Shouldn't we be considering an epidural? What about fetal distress? Are we sure the baby's position is optimal?" "Alexander," Sophia gasped between contractions, "you're being more nervous than I am, and I'm the one having the baby." "Dr. Sterling," the obstetrician said gently, "why don't you focus on supporting your wife instead of trying to manage her medical care?" The moment Elena was placed in Sophia's arms, everything else fell away. Alexander felt his heart stop and restart as he looked at his daughter for the first time. This tiny, perfect person who was half him, half the woman he loved more than life itself. "She's beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with tears. "She's absolutely perfect." "She looks like you," Sophia murmured, exhausted but radiant. "She looks like you. Look at those eyes, that little nose." They argued gently about whose features Elena had inherited while she slept peacefully, oblivious to being the center of their universe. Parenthood was everything they'd expected, and nothing they'd been prepared for. Elena was a good baby, sleeping through the night by 3 months and greeting each day with the sunny disposition that would become her trademark. But the adjustment to being parents while maintaining their careers required constant negotiation and compromise. Alexander had initially planned to take only 2 weeks of paternity leave, but found himself unable to leave his daughter for more than a few hours. He rearranged his surgery schedule, declined speaking engagements, and turned down a prestigious fellowship that would have required travel. "You don't have to do this," Sophia told him one morning, finding him in the nursery at dawn, just watching Elena sleep. "I know surgery is important to you." "Surgery was important to me," Alexander corrected, carefully lifting his daughter from her crib. "Surgery is what I do. You and Elena are who I am." Sophia felt her heart melt all over again. This was not the cold, distant man she'd married. This was a father who sang lullabies in slightly off-key baritone, who could change diapers with surgical precision, who kept a photo of his daughter scrubbed to his surgery schedule. Their marriage deepened too, the crisis of new parenthood revealing new strengths in their partnership. When Elena went through a colicky phase that left them both exhausted, they took shifts without complaint or scorekeeping. When Sophia struggled with postpartum anxiety, Alexander arranged for a therapist and took over night feeding so she could sleep. When Alexander worried obsessively about every sniffle and developmental milestone, Sophia gently redirected his protective instincts into constructive channels. "We make a good team," Sophia observed one evening. Both of them collapsed on the couch after finally getting Elena to sleep through a particularly fussy day. "We make an amazing team," Alexander corrected, pulling her closer. "I love watching you be a mother, Sophia. You're so natural at it, so intuitive. I love watching you be a father. You're so gentle with her, so patient. Nothing like you were afraid you'd be." They were learning that love multiplied rather than divided. Loving Elena didn't diminish what they felt for each other, but somehow made it stronger, more complete. On their second anniversary, Alexander surprised Sophia with a proposal that wasn't really a proposal. "I know we're already married," he said, getting down on one knee in their living room while Elena napped nearby. "But I want to ask you to marry me again. This time not because we have to, but because we want to. Not because of circumstances or family pressure or desperation, but because I choose you. Every day, in every way, I choose you." He held out a ring, not the cold, expensive band his father had selected for their first wedding, but something personal and meaningful. A vintage sapphire surrounded by diamonds, set in white gold. "This was my mother's," Alexander said softly. "The only thing of hers my father kept. I've been waiting for the right person to give it to, and now I know why I waited. It was always meant for you." Sophia was crying before he finished speaking. "Alexander, yes. Of course, yes, I choose you too. I choose us." They planned a small ceremony for the following spring, just family and close friends, held in the garden of the Sterling family estate. Eleanor walked Sophia down the aisle, while Alexander waited at the altar with Elena in his arms, their daughter wearing a tiny white dress and chewing contentedly on her father's boutonniere. This time, when they exchanged vows, the words were their own. "Sophia," Alexander said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "you taught me that love isn't something to be feared or controlled, but something to be celebrated. You showed me that the strongest people aren't those who never fall, but those who get back up and choose love anyway. I promise to choose you every day, in good times and challenging ones, in sickness and health, in joy and sorrow. I promise to be the husband you deserve and the father our children deserve. I love you with everything I am." "Alexander," Sophia replied, her voice clear and strong, "you taught me that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most difficult circumstances. You showed me that people can change, grow, and become better than they ever imagined. I promise to support your dreams while building our own together. I promise to love you not just for who you are, but for who you're still becoming. I love you with all my heart." When they kissed this time, it was with the confidence of two people who had chosen each other completely, who had built something real and lasting from the ashes of an arrangement meant to benefit everyone except them. Dr. Sophia Sterling finished her pediatric cardiology residency at the top of her class, specializing in the same type of congenital heart defects that had threatened her mother's life. She joined the team at Sterling Medical Center, where she worked alongside her husband, saving lives and building the reputation that would make their hospital one of the most respected cardiac centers in the country. Elena was now 6 years old, a precocious first grader who announced to anyone who would listen that she was going to be a doctor like mommy and daddy, but for animals instead of people. She had Alexander's intensity and Sophia's compassion, and she had them both wrapped around her little finger. The penthouse had been transformed completely, filled with children's artwork, family photographs, and the comfortable chaos of a home where people actually lived and loved and laughed together. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd met differently?" Sophia asked one evening as they cleaned up after dinner, Elena having fallen asleep on the couch during story time. Alexander considered the question while loading the dishwasher, a domestic task he'd never imagined doing, much less enjoying. "I think if we'd met at a hospital or a conference or some other normal way, I would have been too scared to let you matter, too wrapped up in my own defenses. And I would have been too intimidated by the great Dr. Sterling to see past your reputation to the man underneath." "So you're saying we needed the arranged marriage, the drama, the near disasters?" "I'm saying we needed each other. The circumstances were just the delivery method." Alexander smiled, crossing to where Sophia stood, wiping down counters, and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. "I love our delivery method, even the painful parts. Especially the painful parts, because they taught us what we were really capable of." "And what's that?" "Forgiveness, growth, choosing love even when it's hard." Sophia leaned back against his chest, watching their daughter sleep peacefully on the couch. "Do you think Elena will understand someday how we really started?" "I think Elena will understand that sometimes the best love stories aren't fairy tales. Sometimes they're about two broken people who decided to heal together." "Are we still broken?" Alexander pressed a kiss to her temple. "We're still human, still flawed, still figuring it out as we go. But we're figuring it out together, and that makes all the difference." As if summoned by their conversation, Elena stirred on the couch, opening sleepy eyes to find her parents. "Carry me to bed?" she asked, holding out her arms. "Of course, sweetheart," Alexander said, scooping up his daughter while Sophia gathered discarded toys and books. As they tucked Elena into her princess-themed bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of a childhood filled with love and security, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The arranged marriage, the months of coldness, the betrayal and pain, the accident that had broken Alexander's body but somehow healed his heart. "I love you," Elena mumbled sleepily as they kissed her goodnight. "We love you too, baby," they replied in unison, and Sophia felt her heart swell with the truth of it. Later, as they lay in their own bed, the bed where they'd first come together as husband and wife in truth, rather than just law, Alexander traced lazy patterns on Sophia's shoulder. "Do you know what I'm most grateful for?" he asked. "What?" "That life conspired to put you in my path, even if the method was complicated. That your father's gambling and my father's ambition and your mother's illness all aligned to force us together long enough to realize we belong together. That's a lot of gratitude for a lot of pain. Sometimes the most beautiful flowers grow in the worst soil." Sophia turned in his arms to face him, studying the face she'd learned to love in all its moods and expressions. "Alexander Sterling, are you going poetic on me?" "Maybe a little. You bring out my romantic side. I love your romantic side. I love your practical side. I love your stubborn side and your gentle side and even your slightly obsessive side when it comes to Elena's safety. I love everything about you, Sophia Sterling. Your strength, your kindness, your terrible taste in reality TV shows, the way you steal the covers. I do not steal the covers. You absolutely steal the covers. But I don't mind because it gives me an excuse to sleep closer to you. They made love that night with the quiet passion of long-married couples who had chosen each other again and again through all of life's challenges. Afterward, as Sophia drifted off to sleep in Alexander's arms, she thought about the young woman who had walked down the aisle of St. Matthew's Cathedral more than 6 years ago, desperate and afraid, and convinced she was sacrificing her future for her mother's life. That young woman couldn't have imagined this. A career she loved, a daughter who brought joy to every day, a husband who looked at her like she hung the moon and loved her with a steadiness that had only grown stronger with time. Sometimes, Sophia thought drowsily, the most beautiful love stories don't begin with "once upon a time." Sometimes they begin with desperation and duty, and two people brave enough to stay when leaving would be easier. Sometimes they begin with "I do," even when you don't mean it yet. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they end with "I choose you," said every day for the rest of your lives. What did you think of Alexander and Sophia's journey from reluctant spouses to devoted partners? Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the most difficult circumstances, proving that choosing to love each other every day is the most powerful decision two people can make. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about love, resilience, and the beautiful complexity of human connection.